Welcome everyone. Welcome to Water Talk. Thank you for joining us this evening. I am Seth Wallach. I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator for the Suffolk County Water Authority. And as we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about why we do this program. So we know that water is in the news all the time. There's a ton of information out there about your drinking water, its quality, and we know a lot of that information can be confusing. So we want to make sure you're hearing from us, the experts, and getting the accurate information about your water. We actually launched this program a few years ago. We hold it every couple of months throughout our service territory. Suffolk County Water Authority covers all the way from Melville to Montauk. And you're going to hear tonight from our experts we have here on staff. They're going to talk to you about some of the vital topics that pertain to your water, such as our laboratory and how they test the water and make sure it is safe to drink. We're also going to talk to you tonight about local infrastructure projects that affect you and your neighborhood, the Selden, Centereach, Farmingville, Lake Ronkonkoma area. And we're going to talk to you about WaterTrack, which is actually an online water quality monitoring GIS-based mapping system that allows you to monitor your water quality from home. It's pretty neat. We're going to get into that a little bit later. We're also going to talk to you about what we're doing to encourage you to conserve water and why you should conserve water. We'll give you some best practices on that. But most importantly, the Water Talk program, it's all about answering your water questions. So to that end, if you do have a question as we go through our presentation, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom that everyone has access to. If you have a question, make sure you click that Q&A button and type in your question. We'll be taking all questions at the end of tonight's presentation, but we want to make sure we get to everybody. So make sure you put your questions in that Q&A and we'll make sure we get you an answer. So with that, I actually want to introduce Legislator Nick Caracappa. Nick is somebody who's very familiar to us. He was the head of our union actually since 2006. So we're absolutely thrilled to be able to continue that great relationship with Nick now that he's a member of the legislature. So take it away, Nick.
Thank you, Seth. And I'd like to thank the Suffolk County Water Authority for the opportunity to participate in tonight's Water Talk. Now, as Seth mentioned, as a former SCWA employee of 34 years and now county legislator, water quality is a priority, has always been a priority of mine, as well as all of my neighbors. I know that in our communities. Suffolk County Water Authority takes great pride in the work they do there. And I can assure everyone that our water quality is their highest priority. Without question about that. I can tell you firsthand. And if our office here at the 4th LD can ever be of service to any of our constituents, our business partners, or even to the SCWA, Suffolk County Water Authority, please feel free to contact us at any time on our staff. Again, it's excellent to be a part of this tonight, and we appreciate you putting this together.
Thank you so much, Legislator. We really appreciate that and for all the work that you do.
Thank you as well. Thank you for the quality of water.
All right. So to talk a little bit about who we are at SCWA, I'm going to, at this time, introduce Rich Reinfrank. Rich is our Director of Customer Service. So take it away, Rich.
Good evening. My name is Richard Reinfrank. I'm the Director of Customer Service, and I have over 35 years with the Suffolk County Water Authority. So what is Suffolk County Water Authority? Suffolk County Water Authority is an independent public benefit corporation. We operate under the Public Authorities Law of the state of New York. We serve approximately 1.2 million Suffolk County residents. We began our operations in 1951. The Water Authority operates without taxing power, and we are a not-for-profit company. So we are on a not-for-profit basis. We are also one of the largest groundwater suppliers in the country. So we have some of the lowest water rates in the country among the largest water suppliers. We have 2 AAA bond ratings from Fitch and Standard & Poor. That puts us in the top 1 percentile of the nation's 20,000 water suppliers for fiscal responsibility. That's pretty good company to be amongst. What we are not, and just to make it clear, we are not a branch of Suffolk County government, and we do not create or enforce any drinking water standards. These standards are the responsibility of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the New York State Department of Health. We don't necessarily follow these, but we follow these. We don't necessarily create them, but we do follow them. At this point, we're going to turn it over to Mr. Tim Kilcommons, our Chief Engineer and Director of Research and Development. Tim?
Tim, give it 1 second before we get started. Just a quick programming note. I wanted to thank Legislator Caracappa again for joining us. He may have to get going in a little bit, but we just want to really thank him for joining us here tonight. We really do appreciate it.
My pleasure again, Seth, and thank everyone for the fine work that you continue to do over there at the authority. We all appreciate it.
All right, take it away, Tim.
Okay, thanks, Seth. As Rich said, my name is Tim Kilcommons. I'm currently Chief Engineer of Suffolk County Water Authority. Held that position for about 7 years now. Prior to that, I was Director of our Construction Maintenance Group, and I've been with the authority for 20 years. So just some basic stats on the size of our system, probably a lot larger than a lot of people would expect. We have a total of 633 wells, 587 of which are active currently. And those are spread out amongst 240 pump stations. 68 storage tanks, those are ground storage reservoirs and standpipes and elevated tanks for a total of 71.6 million gallons of storage. Our average daily pumpage is 210 million gallons, and our peak pumpage, which was this summer, was 470 million gallons in a day. Right, so just to give you an idea of the size and scope of our system, the blue dots on this map show the extent, or these are our pump stations spread out, and we're everywhere on the western side from Huntington and Amityville on the South Shore, all the way out to the tips of the forks at Orient and Montauk. The stars on that system denote manned facilities that we have. So we're not too far. We have construction maintenance crews. We have production control crews that handle the water supply, at a moment's notice to be able to respond to emergencies. Next slide, Seth. Thanks. For this side, we actually have one of our hydrogeologists on with us tonight. That's Scott Strom. So Scott, if you can hear me, come on in and you can talk about the water cycle and how groundwater flows.
I'm sorry, I was muted, wasn't I?
Yeah, you are.
Sorry, let me start that over again. So where does our water come from? It comes from precipitation, rain, snow, ice melt. Here in Long Island, we get about 44 inches of rain a year. Approximately half of that, 22 inches, is recharged each year into the aquifers. But now, what is an aquifer? An aquifer, especially here on Long Island, is very unique. It's not found many places in the world. Just 10,000 years ago, Long Island, as we know it today, was not here. There was 6 miles of ice above us. There was no present-day Long Island. So the glaciers deposited this material, this sand, clay, gravel aquifers that we have beneath us. So here on Long Island, we have 3 main aquifers. We have the water table aquifer, or the upper glacial aquifer, as we call it. Then we have the Magothy aquifer, which is the middle aquifer, and then the deepest would be the Raritan. So 80% of our wells come from the Magothy aquifer. The Magothy aquifer was deposited about 65 million years ago, so very long time ago. And about 20% of our wells come from the upper glacial aquifer. We do have a few wells that are in the Lloyd aquifer, but there's a moratorium with the DEC and we no longer drill into the Lloyd to protect it. So, like I said, the simplest way to put it is Long Island's a huge sandbox. We're bordered from the south to the Atlantic Ocean, to the north by the Long Island Sound. And in between that is just a huge storage, or in between pore spaces for the water, rainwater, to collect.
Okay, thanks for that, Scott.
Yeah.
This slide here is an indication of well sites that are in your area tonight, and you can see we're fairly decentralized, and that's actually one of the strengths of our system. And the reason for that is that if we were to have a problem, let's say with water quality or power, or for some reason, let's say a water main break or something, that one particular pump station couldn't get water to the system, the customers, you as customers would never know that because we would continue to serve you from the other pump stations. So really a strength of our system as opposed to a centralized system where maybe they only have one or two sources of supply. Shot here of main breaks from 2019 to current in your communities. You can see there's not a lot there. The past few years have actually been fairly quiet in terms of main breaks. And that's mostly because of warm winters, but also in no small part to the amount of water main replacement we do every year. Last year's capital budget had about $22 million in it for replacement of water mains. So we're constantly seeking to improve the system and to keep it in shape. Can we go to the next slide, Seth? So here's a picture here of actually one of our utility men. Legislator Caracappa used to represent our utility men and women in the union. And these guys and girls are out there 24/7, 365 days a year, responding to emergencies like water main breaks and leaks. And we do use in-house labor to do all of that work. And you can see here how complicated, in this particular photo, it's probably summertime, he's in short sleeves, but most of our main breaks happen as a result of colder temperatures. And these guys and girls are in there in that trench. You know, it could be 10 degrees out, the water is freezing and they're still in there. This particular trench, you can see he's got those gray hoses there are going to what we call well points. So this is probably a high groundwater area. And then he's got that yellow hose down there in front of him. That's for what we call a trash pump or a mud sucker. And that's to empty out the water that's coming out of the main on a normal trench where we don't have high groundwater. And these things, we actually have fewer main breaks per 100 miles than most utilities of our size. And again, that's because of the care and the capital that we've put into our system. Next slide. So besides maintaining this system of this size, we're also looking to improve it. And we're also reacting to regulatory requirements in terms of water quality and changing water quality in the aquifer. So some of the infrastructure improvements that we've done here are generator replacements. After Sandy, we responded very well with that, but what we saw was we could definitely use additional backup power at our sites. And so we were able to apply for and receive $17 million in grants to fund the purchase of 50 generators that were spread throughout our territory. We've, in terms of additional water supply, we've put boosters at our South Howell station, added a booster pump at Virginia Avenue for the improvement of fire flows and pressure. Same thing at Samuel Street to improve fire flow and pressure for the business district on Portion Road in Ronkonkoma. In terms of water quality, iron removal systems that were added to Easton Street over by the railroad tracks. Granular activated carbon treatment systems, which have been in the news quite a bit lately because they're extremely efficient at treating perfluorinated compounds or PFCs. And we've put a system at Horse Block. We've put 2 systems at Morris Avenue and another 2 systems at Flint Lane just in the past few months in response to perfluorinated compounds. In terms of additional supply, we've done a replacement well at Morris Avenue that added, I think, 1,000 gallons a minute to our capacity there. And that was a replacement well. And that's a proactive well replacement program that we have as part of our capital program. And we've also added capacity at Horse Block Road, and that was 1,388 gallons a minute well. So more supply to meet increased demands. And now I'll hand it over to Catherine Nicoletti at our lab. Kathy?
Thanks, Tim. Hi, my name is Kathy Nicoletti, and I've been with Suffolk County Water Authority for the past 15 years. I started off as a field technician. I've worked my way up through the ranks from sample collection supervisor to bacteriology department supervisor to my current position as a project coordinator. And I, like yourself, am also a Suffolk County Water Authority customer, so I take a lot of pride in what I do here in the lab. SCWA's state-of-the-art laboratory is the largest testing groundwater facility in the nation. Our test samples are taken at the wellhead, at various stages of treatment, and within the distribution system for bacteria and a wide range of inorganic and organic compounds. SCWA's in-house standards for water quality are often tougher than state or federal regulations. We tested for 400 compounds. That's 251 more than required by our regulators. And we are testing at a higher frequency than is required by us by the Suffolk County Department of Health Services. Last year, we analyzed 75,000 samples that produced 181,000 tests. This is a field technician. She is collecting a water sample for bacteria, and she is using what we call an aseptic technique. And this technique will allow her to collect that sample properly. We have about 300 of these located throughout Suffolk County, from Melville to Montauk to Orient Point, and they are geographically spread out throughout Suffolk. And these sampling stations will allow us to test our distribution water right before it enters our customers' homes and businesses. From these sampling stations, we collect about 940 samples a month for bacteria alone. And our bacteriology department runs 2,000 to 4,000 samples tested for bacteria from our source water, our wells, and our distribution. So if you see one of these green boxes in your neighborhood, now you know what it is. Next slide, Seth. This is an example of our consumer confidence report. We refer to it as the CCR. If you're interested in your water quality, you could visit scwa.com. And here you could read about Suffolk County Water Authority's current events, our latest water treatment techniques, and the water quality that's specific for your area. This is all the water quality that the laboratory staff here works so hard every year to produce, and it's updated every year. Levels of detection. SCWA's state-of-the-art laboratory instruments can detect compounds in the water down to parts per million, parts per billion, and in some cases, even parts per trillion. So I want to explain a little bit about levels of detection, just so you get a better understanding, because it's important when we talk about contaminants or emerging contaminants. For instance, part per trillion, that's the equivalent of a drop of water in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, or 1 second in 32,000 years. So that's pretty small. Our instrumentation is so sophisticated and complex that there is no such thing as zero, and we could keep testing down until we see just trace amounts. So as you could see, our water is tested rigorously here at SCWA. Scott?
All right, thank you very much. Hi, everybody. My name is Scott Strom. I'm the senior hydrogeologist at Suffolk County Water Authority. I've been here for approximately 6 years. Before this, I did hydrogeology work for private engineering for approximately 12 years. So let me talk to you a little bit about WaterTrack. WaterTrack is a brand new GI-based water quality database. It was brought to us from the Long Island Commission for Aquifer Protection, or we call it Lycap. What this does is this brings all of Long Island's water quality data, because there's so many different regulators, there's different authorities, not just Suffolk County, there's other water authorities throughout the island. So we want to take all the information and gather all the information from the island, put it in one place where you can search, query, and find information. So you could find this GIS database at licponline.com. And like I said, that water quality information is coming from all the wells throughout the island, not just Suffolk County Water Authority. So it comes from all different laboratories, all different water suppliers. It's very intuitive. It's pretty user-friendly. First, if you see on the upper left-hand corner, you could see an address box. You can just put in your address, type that in, and it'll come up to your district where you can search and see raw water collected from your area. So you can search per compound, so it could be very specific to that, or you could just look for the water quality data, say for 6 months or a year. You'll also have the maximum contaminant levels, or you'll also could find out the state regulations on a certain chemical through this. The easiest way to go about this is there's YouTube tutorials that are online that go through it and makes it very user-friendly. And now we'll talk a little bit about water conservation. Now, why should I conserve water? Like I said earlier, New York, Long Island, we're very fortunate for the amount of water we have. We have trillions of gallons of water underneath our feet, but that doesn't mean we could just use it all. And most of the biggest thing is trying to get it to the customer. So if we use more water, what it means is more infrastructure. We got to get the water from the ground, and most places very deep in the ground, say 800, some of my wells are down to 800 feet. But then you got to have the pipe, the infrastructure to get it to the customer. And a lot of times everybody wants it all at once. And that brings me into high peak water usage. So if you don't know, the #1 use of water is irrigation. So right around 3 to 7 o'clock, especially 5 a.m. is our biggest tax on our water system. And we want to make sure it doesn't get taxed because we need to make sure that we have pressure and fire protection. If everybody's using the water at once, we have a pressure drop in the system. The biggest threat is that if there was a fire and the fire department went to the hydrant, we want to make sure we have adequate pressure to put that fire out. We could also have, when you overpump, if you pump too much, you could have negative water quality impacts. Typically in the middle of the island, this won't happen. This is more about coastal communities. If you overpump near coastal communities or North and South Fork, you might have a thinner layer of fresh water available. So if you overpump that, you could have saltwater intrusion. So this is a graph, which I was just talking about seasonal water use, especially in the summer. So as you can see, that peak is about 480 gallons per minute, 480,000 gallons per minute. So it's a tremendous amount of water. And you can see that peak is at 5 a.m. It's because what everybody has their sprinklers set on typically. Here in Suffolk County Water Authority, we have about approximately 600 wells. When it's summertime, we have just about every single well in operation. Now, in the wintertime, we only have about a third of our wells in service. So 2/3 of our wells, about 400 wells, are typically out of service and not needed. So it just goes to show how much demand irrigation or just water sprinkling taxes our system. So we would really like to have customers conserve or get better irrigation practices, just so 1, you can save money, and 2, we can conserve. And like I said earlier, we're not going to run out of water. It would take hundreds of years of no precipitation for that to happen, but we'd still need to conserve it and be smart about it. So that gets me into changing irrigation habits. Like we said, the peak is at 5 a.m. It seems that everybody sets their sprinklers at that. So we would like to ask customers not to operate your sprinklers between 3 and 7 o'clock a.m. or use an odd or even water schedule. So one thing I didn't show in that graph before was that a summer day, we used a high peak. Even when it's raining in the summer, we still have an extremely high peak. So, the customer can save money. If you see that, yeah, thanks for going back. So the rainy summer day is still 300,000 gallons per minute, and typically that's all mostly irrigation as well. So it just shows that a lot of people are irrigating even when it's raining. So we just go back one more, Seth. So if you consider a smart irrigation timer, that'll stop it for your irrigation system to go on if it's raining. And you could also get $50 off your next Suffolk County Water Authority purchase. or your bill.
All right. Thanks so much, Scott. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So at this time, I just want to remind everybody, if you do have questions, make sure you're typing your question into the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom call. I see Zoom webinar chat function as well. That's fine. I'll take a look at the chat once we got through all the questions in the Q&A, but to just make sure we see your question and make sure we can answer it, make sure you're using that Q&A function. So I'm actually going to piggyback a little bit on what Scott said about water conservation and some of the programs that the Water Authority has to help our customers out. So just so everyone's aware, the average user, the average residential user in our service territory uses about 130,000 gallons a year. Just for comparison, we had one private resident on the East End. They used approximately 22 million gallons in a recent year, which is more than Southampton Hospital used in 2018. So we just want to make sure that everyone's aware of what we like to call the irrigation situation on Long Island and in Suffolk County, to make sure we're making sure we're using our best watering practices. And to that end, making sure we're using smart irrigation controllers and rain sensors whenever we can. We also want folks to water less often, and that includes odd even watering schedules. Like Scott mentioned, odd numbered homes can water on odd days, even numbered homes can water on even days. This way, if everyone's not using their sprinkler systems at the same time, it's a huge help for us at the Water Authority, and it'll help our customers in the long run as well. Making sure we're using EPA WaterSense products, that's a huge one. If you look for this label, when you buy things like faucets, shower heads, water products like that, if they have the EPA WaterSense logo, that means that they're not necessarily low flow, but they're WaterSense flow. And shortening showers, we like to say, 5-10 minutes. Some people are in the shower for 30 minutes. We like to try to cut down on those when we can. And then a big one is detecting and fixing leaks in the home. Even a slow drip of a sink can have a big impact on your water bill over time if it's not addressed. Some other tips, some other best practices, shutting off the tap when you're brushing your teeth, simple things like that. Making sure dishwashers, washing machines are running full loads before we turn them on. Keeping your plants moist with mulch. And then not necessarily hosing off the driveway, for example. Maybe use a broom to sweep it off instead, just a little water saver right there. And going to a car wash that actually recycles the water instead of washing our cars at home. Great way to support some local businesses as well. So now I want to talk about how the Water Authority can help you when it comes to saving water. I want to talk about our Waterwise programs. So the first of those programs is what we call the Waterwise Checkup. Now, this is a free service where Water Authority experts will come to your home in a one-on-one consultation, and they'll kind of go through your historical usage over the past several years and come up with a personalized game plan for you to save water. This program is on hold right now only because of the COVID pandemic. We'll be getting back to it as quick as we can because we found that the folks that we do visit with our checkup program end up saving a significant amount of water in the end. The other program that's been extremely popular here at the Authority is our Waterwise accounts credits. So if you want to take advantage of a $50 credit off your water bill, all you've got to do is visit scwa.com/Waterwise. You'll see an e-form there on our website that you can fill out. And if you purchase a water saving device, let's say you purchase a smart sprinkler controller, all you have to do is fill out our e-form and show us the receipt that you purchased that water saving device, and we'll give you that $50 credit. We also offer credits for low flow shower heads, faucet aerators, and smart meters that you can actually, or not smart meters, I should say, smart valves, smart shutoff valves that actually attach to your home service line. Those are also available for $50 credits. Like I said, if you have any questions on that, you can give us a call. You can email waterwisecheckup@scwa.com. We're happy to answer any questions about the program, or you could always hit us up on Facebook, on Twitter. We're always around to answer questions as well. The other thing I want to talk to you about tonight in terms of water conservation is the Our Water, Our Lives program. So Scott mentioned earlier the Long Island Commission for Aquifer Protection. Well, one of Lycap's cornerstone initiatives is Our Water, Our Lives. That's Lycap's comprehensive water conservation campaign. As you can see from this photo here, we've got Suffolk County, we've got Nassau County over here represented. And basically what Our Water, Our Lives does is it gets Long Islanders to take the pledge to conserve water and gives Long Islanders the tools they need to conserve water. So I encourage everyone to visit ourwaterourlives.com if you have a chance. Check out some of our great tips for best practices and take the pledge to save water. Over 4,000 Long Islanders have taken the pledge so far. So make sure you follow the Our Water, Our Lives accounts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram as well. They put out some great tips for you. So with that, we're going to open it up to the questions portion of the presentation. I see we've got about 25 questions in the Q&A right now. So we'll be taking those in the order they were received. If you do have a question, there's still plenty of time. Hit that Q&A button. Let us know what your question is. I'm going to be reading the questions out loud just for the record, just so everyone can hear them. And then whoever of our panel wants to jump in with an answer is welcome to do so. All right, so jumping right into it, we've got our first question. Why does my water smell so strongly of chlorine? Tim, I don't know if that's one that you want to tackle.
I could take that one, Seth.
Sure.
Okay, so chlorine is added to our drinking water. It's a very important part of the process for the distribution system and for it traveling from the well to your homes. It's been a practice since the late 1800s. By New York state law, we are allowed to put out a 4.0 ppm, that's parts per million, of chlorine into our distribution system. And we currently only put out a 1 part. Sometimes you could smell chlorine in your drinking water. It depends on people's sensitivity. Some people are more sensitive to it than others. And unfortunately, it's a practice that, we have to do prior to adding chlorine to the system. That's when we used to have in society outbreaks of cholera and dysentery and things of that nature. So if you do smell chlorine, it shouldn't be a problem. It's actually a very good thing.
Thank you. And if I could just add something on that, the best way to get rid of that chlorine odor or smell is there's 2 different ways. You can just use a Brita inside your or any over the counter filtration system like a Brita, or you could even leave the water out in an open pitcher for 24 hours and that chlorine will dissipate.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but I think oftentimes if there's a strong smell of chlorine in somebody's water, it actually might mean that there's not enough chlorine in that water. It's kind of counterintuitive with the chlorine coming as solution, right?
Correct, because once free chlorine is used up, it produces chloramines, and chloramines have a stronger odor than the chlorine itself. So even though it smells like chlorine, a lot of times it's not the chlorine that you're actually tasting or smelling.
All right, great, thanks. So the next question we have here is, what is the pinkish red bloom that shows up in the toilet or the sink or pet water bowls? They said it's been happening more frequently lately. Can anyone kind of speak to that little pinkish color?
Yeah, I can take that if you want, Scott. That's generally indicative of a bacteria, and that's not something, as Kathy just explained, that's one of the reasons that we do put the chlorine in the water and are mandated to do so, to prevent that from happening. And typically you will see that in the toilet. Pet water bowl is another one. You can get it from airborne dust, that bacteria. You can get it from pet hair, pet dander, pet saliva, a whole multitude of things. And also the fact that the water, once it's in your house, the water may be sitting for long periods of time, stagnant. The water in your toilet tank could be sitting for days and days, and it doesn't get completely emptied out and refilled every single time that the toilet is flushed. So the water quality deteriorates there. The other thing is that people who have a whole house filter installed, you might be effectively removing any chlorine residual that we've put in the water. And so any of the water in your home has the chlorine removed, and so that's a possibility for any of that. It's typically seen more in the summer when your home and the water in the toilet and in your pet bowl would be warmer. You don't usually see it as much in the winter, so I'm not certain why that would be. It'd have to be looked at on an individual basis.
And I also just want to add that that type of bacteria, it's called Serratia bursans, and it is not harmful. It's not a harmful type of bacteria. There's bacteria everywhere. So you find it in your bathrooms because it loves the condition of the moisture. And once it gets that perfect condition, optimal condition, it starts to proliferate and it turns pink. It's actually a very common thing, and you could just wipe it right off with bleach if you do see it.
Right. The next question we've got, Frank is curious. He's got an under sink filter, and he says before it goes through his filtration, that filter that he replaces, or I guess looks at monthly, he says it can be even as brown as coffee. Is that an iron issue?
Seth, I would say that, does it say his location of Suffolk County?
It does not, but I think everyone in here is from, the Centereach, Selden, Lake Ronkonkoma region.
It sounds like it could be indicative of iron. And if he's seeing an iron issue, if he calls our customer service number, which is 631-695-9500, he could put in a complaint with them, and we could come out and flush his hydrant and test the water and see exactly what's going on. Sometimes, because iron is in two oxidation states, it's a soluble and an insoluble. Where we can't add iron removal systems, we add a polyphosphate. Sometimes the iron settles at the bottom of the main, and it will we'll have to go out and flush the iron out of the mains, until it's clear again. So there could just be an accumulation of iron. So if he just contacts us, we'll come out and check it out.
And just to add to that, there's irons naturally occurring in our aquifers and in our groundwater dissolved. So there is tiny bits of iron that's dissolved. It's completely healthy. It's underneath any health regulation, but just got to know that it's naturally occurring and it's safe.
The other thing that you could look for is if the water that's causing that staining is your hot water, it can sometimes be indicative of a hot water heater that's rusting on the interior.
And I just wanted to point out that number again was 631-698-9500. Can be found on your bill or on our website.
All right, excellent. Thanks, everyone. So the next question, Frank just brought up a little later, hearing about things like Flint, Michigan. I just want to point out, and feel free anyone to jump in, but we really can't have any scenarios in Suffolk County like they had in Flint, Michigan. What happened over there is they actually switched water sources, and when they switched, they didn't do proper corrosion control. Suffolk County Water Authority is always adding lime to the water in order to do that proper corrosion control, in order to make sure your water is always at a neutral pH, so it can't corrode out our infrastructure and it can't corrode out your pipes at home, which is kind of what happened in Flint. They had some lead infrastructure there. Everything in Suffolk County is really post-World War II. We don't really have lead infrastructure. We're not really as old as somewhere like Flint. So we can never see a situation exactly like that. I don't know if anyone wants to expand on that.
Well, I just want to say that with my slides, you saw a picture of a woman collecting a sample at a sampling station. And I explained we have 300 of those sample stations located throughout Suffolk County. And this is where we collect distribution samples right before the water enters your home. So it's representative water. Each sample station is tested every single week. And the first thing we do when we arrive at a sample station is we test the chlorine residual and the pH. And if the pH is not within range or is not optimal at 7.0, then we contact what is called our production control area, and we try to find out, if there's a problem and how we could correct it right away. So we are on top of the pH and the corrosion control. We also report all of that to the Suffolk County Department of Health Services on a monthly basis. So it's, we're not, like Seth said, to your point, Seth, that we're not going to be in a position the way Flint, Michigan was.
And just to add to what Kathy's saying, on top of the work that the lab does, our production control people can actually see, we have telemetry at our pump stations where the chlorine and the lime is added to buffer for the pH. And we can actually see those levels real time, and we'll get alarms if one or the other is out of whack.
All right, great, thanks. So Edward actually asks, is this meeting to convince us that the drinking water that makes you turn your nose up at the smell is healthy? And the short answer to that is yes, that's exactly what this meeting is for, Edward. So as you heard from Kathy earlier as part of her presentation, our water is tested exhaustively. We always know what's in our water, and the water that's coming to your home is absolutely unequivocally safe to drink. The Suffolk County Department of Health Services and even more the New York State Department of Health, they set drinking water standards. And New York State has the toughest drinking water standards in the country. All water served by the Water Authority meets or exceeds these standards for quality. So the answer to your question is yes. Frank is curious if we've ever considered an iron removal system in Farmingville. I don't know if we have any that are close by to there.
No, like I said, like Easton Street we did, but actually in Farmingville, off the top of my head, I don't know. What we do is we're constantly taking a look at the water quality and the levels and where it's required. We look at doing it. We'll sequester with the polyphosphate, as Kathy said earlier on, immediately when we see the levels. And if they rise to the point where it needs something more, we'll invest the money into an iron removal system.
All right, great. So somebody else has a question, and just so everyone's aware, if there's a couple of repeat, questions, we've already seen a couple of brown water questions or chlorine questions. I'm just going to kind of sift through to get some new questions. Just making sure we're not repeating ourselves here. So Charles is curious. He mentions hard water spots that he sees in the interior of his home. We don't actually have hard water at Suffolk County Water Authority because we do that pH control. But I don't know if anyone wants to expand on why we don't actually see hard water.
Well, hard water is actually the measure of the calcium and magnesium. And generally, we don't have hard water in Suffolk. I deal with a lot of customer complaints, and generally all the customer concerns that I've tested were from moderate and for soft mostly. Sometimes on the east end, I've seen a few that were hard, but not in the middle of the island.
Charles also brings up a good point. He's curious if we can post the video of this water talk on YouTube. The answer to that is yes. All water talks, whether they be in person or virtual, are posted on the Water Authority's YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and type Suffolk County Water Authority to find us. They're also posted on our website under the Water Talk link off of our homepage. So yes, this presentation and this video are going to be accessible for anyone who wasn't able to make it tonight and wants to watch later. Absolutely. So Charles was curious about drilling into some other layers of the aquifer. I don't know if Scott, if you want to cover this, water quality and the Lloyd, and he's curious, why haven't we really taken advantage of that Lloyd aquifer at this point?
There's a moratorium with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. There's some environmental interest to try to preserve that. That's mostly the last untapped aquifer that we have. It's very deep. The water is very old. It could be 10,000 years old there. So yes, it is a great water source. It is essentially free of contaminants and clean, but we're trying to protect that for future generations.
And is it necessary to tap the Lloyd? I mean, we've got this great water, as Kathy can attest to, in Agatha.
We're fortunate that we have good enough water quality right beneath our feet that we don't have to use that. So we would like to keep that in our pocket just in case. And but there's certain places, coastal communities, that have been allowed to drill into the Lloyd because that gives them fresh water where otherwise might have too much chlorides in the maggot through the upper glacial aquifer.
All right, great. I think this is Frank again. He was just curious about some of the old landfills leaching into the groundwater, Yaphank, Holtzville area. I don't believe we really see, we don't really see the chemicals that you'd find at landfills leaching into our water when we're taking and testing these water samples. Kathy, is that correct? Is that fair to say?
No, that's correct. The
Okay.
landfills, I believe they use certain liners so that that doesn't happen. And there's monitoring wells, even that the health department has all around the landfill to try to avoid that.
So Aaron is curious about a couple of specific compounds, nitrates and 1,4-dioxane. He's curious about nitrates in particular, compared with, the EPA limit for nitrates. Is that something that we are seeing when we do our sampling?
We do find nitrates in the water, but in these areas, Centereach, Selden, Ronkonkoma, and Farmingville, we do not have any exceedance on nitrates at all.
No, and actually the trend over decades that we've been looking at our wells is not an increase in nitrates. It's actually a slight decrease in nitrate levels.
So if nitrates are found in a well, it's easy to treat that. So if there's a well that's drilled on the same property that doesn't have nitrates, we can easily blend the two if necessary.
All right, great. And then the other part of the question was just about 1,4-dioxane. So the New York State actually recently regulated 1,4-dioxane at 1 part per billion in drinking water in New York State. The Water Authority does not serve any water which exceeds this 1 part per billion state standard. So we're obviously working on installing more and more treatment systems for 1,4-dioxane because the Water Authority's internal standards are stricter than even the strictest New York State standards. So we're trying to install 1,4-dioxane treatment anywhere we see half the standard, which is 0.5 parts per billion. But we're not serving any water that's above one part per billion, and we will not serve any water that's above 1 part per billion.
Yeah, we're looking to treat 1,4-dioxane where we do have it with what's called an advanced oxidation process treatment system, or AOP. We have the first one in New York State was ours at Commercial Boulevard in the Central Islip area. We have a contract out on the street right now that is to be bid actually later this week on the 21st for 16 additional AOP reactors, they're called, that we'll be building over the next few years. So we're on top of that and we're moving forward with treatment.
All right, great. Chris is curious if someone could describe kind of the steps his water goes through, all the way from the well all the way to his house. Just describe that process.
Yeah, sure. I could take that. So when the water is pumped up and out of the ground at the well, and all of our water is, of course, groundwater. There's no surface water involved. It gets pumped to a treatment building on the site where it gets disinfectant, which is the chlorine, and we also buffer it with a lime solution to raise the pH for anti-corrosion. And then it goes out into the water mains in the street. If it needs further treatment, it also gets it on site there. So if it needs GAC or carbon treatment, we do that. If it had 1,4-dioxane, we would have an AOP in place, whatever the treatment is that's necessary. Then when it gets served into the distribution system, we have a network. We have about 6,000 miles of pipe in our distribution system. And that's kind of on par, just to give you an idea. New York City, I believe, has about 6,800 miles of pipe. So we're about 90% of the size of New York City, which is, what anybody would consider a huge system. So we use that network of water main to take it to the home. There's a service that comes out of that water main. It runs through a meter, and then from the meter vault, if your meter vault is outside, which most of ours are at this point, from the meter vault to the house is the customer-owned service line, and that's how it gets to your house.
All right, great, thanks, Tim.
Sure.
So someone was curious how they can have the water in their home tested. Rich, I don't know if you just want to repeat that customer service number really quick.
Absolutely. 631-698-9500. May I ask to speak with a customer service representative who will be happy to help you.
Excellent. All right. Not a question, but Karina actually has a great tip in here. How do you get rid of the chlorine taste? Filter through the fridge. If your refrigerator has a filter on it, you could also use a Brita filter, which uses carbon as well. That will sort of take out some of that chlorine, which is good for the taste of your water. Just be mindful. Make sure you're changing out that filter when it's supposed to be changed out. Otherwise, you're actually inviting bacteria that we've already made sure is not in your water. To begin with. So just make sure you're changing out those filters when they're supposed to be changed, and that's a great way to cut down on chlorine taste. Abe is curious what happens when chemical compounds are detected that are beyond the acceptable range. What do we do when this happens, when we do have a detection that's above a limit?
So our water is constantly tested, as we said earlier in the PowerPoint, and we are constantly reviewing data here at the laboratory. So by the time the levels get to half of what an exceedance is, a well is taken out of service. And whether it needs the granular activated carbon to be changed out or some other type of remedial service, then, we'll decide at that time. But we don't let the water get to an exceedance that easily. We're constantly testing it.
All right.
So we go above and beyond.
All right, great, terrific. I think we covered the remediation of 1,4-dioxane, but Perry was just curious specifically about cost estimates for state mandated remediation of 1,4-dioxane. We do have a number that we've been using to install the new treatment systems we're looking to install, right, Tim?
We do. I think the estimate was about $177 million for both 1,4-dioxane and PFC, or perfluorinated compound treatment. On an individual basis, we'll have to see how these contracts come out, but we're estimating that each AOP system for 1,4-dioxane will cost around $1.5 million.
Yep.
Judy is curious what the highest cause of pollution to our water system is. I'm trying to think of a good way to answer this question that doesn't just say polluters, but it is, it's companies. It's companies that are putting these compounds like your PFOA, PFOS, 1,4-dioxane. It's these chemical manufacturers that ultimately end up putting these compounds into our water, and it's why the Water Authority is suing these companies for the cost of treatment to take them out of water, because we believe that it's these companies that should be held responsible financially for that contamination, and not you, our customers, who didn't pollute our aquifer.
And a lot of them, Seth, are also what we call legacy contaminants. So they've been around for a long, long time, like Grumman and things that we're finding in the groundwater that was put there in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. We're just starting to see some of that now. Also, nitrates is a part of the pollution here on Long Island too. We do blend and we do have remedial services for nitrates, but that's because of the overpopulation, the cesspools and fertilizers and the runoff.
Yeah, so essentially here in Long Island, we call it a sole source aquifer because it's the only aquifer we have right beneath our feet. And, in Long Island, we have about 3 million people. So we have everything from gas stations, dry cleaners, manufacturing process, even cesspools. And just going back to the 1,4-dioxane, a lot of that you're seeing in the water, because it's going down to such a fine, we're just looking for 1 part per billion, which is an extremely small amount. Some of that can be linked back just to personal care products. Sometimes that's in hand creamers and detergents. So it's not always just the large industrial spill. It's just normal living practices over the sole source aquifer. And that's why we need to have constant testing and treatment.
All right. Chris is curious if a particular house can be served by just one or two of our wells. His concern is that he's being served mostly from an upper glacial well. Do we have any upper glacial wells in this part of the island?
Probably Centereach, Selden, and probably no legacy glacial wells in that zone. I couldn't tell you 100%, but there's not many if there is any.
Yeah, it's more likely that you're being served by wells that are in that Magathy layer, I would say. But to the first part of the question, being served by just one or two wells, I think that's probably the case for most of our customers. Your water is coming from wells that are close to you, a mile, 2 miles from your home. All right, so we've got another question about 1,4-dioxane and the lawsuits. It says if SCWA wins the lawsuits against these companies, will we get reimbursed? So we can say kind of without a doubt that if the Water Authority is able to win these lawsuits, and we do expect to win these lawsuits, there's going to be a financial benefit to our customers. Whether that comes in the form of a straight reimbursement, I'm not sure. But whatever affects our bottom line helps your bottom line at the end of the day. The Water Authority, as we covered at the beginning of tonight's presentation, operates as a non-for-profit utility. So when we win those lawsuits, that's a win for us. That's a win for your wallets as well, certainly. Is our water safe to drink related to 1,4-dioxane? I think we covered that. The answer is yes. You're not getting any water that has elevated levels of 1,4-dioxane in it. When water was dark today in Centereach, I think we covered that a little bit with the iron conversation earlier. Chris is curious, are monitoring wells used and sampled from near and around sumps or recharge basins in local neighborhood watersheds to test what is infiltrating back into the upper glacial?
Yeah, that's a broad, it's a huge subject or topic. The short answer is yes. There's monitoring wells all over the island. That's from the Suffolk County Department of Health, and the DEC has their own network of monitoring wells. If there was any local spills that's known about from the DEC, then they're required to get monitoring wells installed, which is probably tested by private engineering firms. So there's hundreds of thousands of wells throughout the Long Island that's being tested. And so there's a ton of testing going on out there, but a lot of different municipalities and people doing it. And that's also why we wanted to make, Lycap wanted to make the water track to try to bring a lot of that information together at once, just to help the regulators, help the communities, and the water professionals.
All right, thank you, Scott. Next question we have, is there any way we could test the water quality at home? I think the short answer to that is no, probably. But I don't know if you want to expand on that at all, Kathy.
If they have a problem, they're seeing iron or something, they can call our customer service number. Like Rich said, it's 631-698-9500, and they could speak to a customer service rep and explain their problem, and then we will determine what needs to be tested.
All right, terrific.
Jeff, can I just go back to that question one more? I want
Sure,
to speak about
sure.
the monitoring wells quick, just a point. That's raw water too. That's not what you're going to be treated water going to the customer. And typically the monitoring wells, a lot of that stuff is very shallow. So that just spans the water table. That could be anywhere from 2 feet down, maybe 80 feet in the upper glacial. Like I said, 80% of our wells are from the Magathy. So most of your water is coming from 400 to 800 feet down, and it's approximately about 500 years old.
And even if you are getting your water from an upper glacial well, that water is meeting the same quality standards as well as any other well in the system.
Yep, absolutely. That's a great point, Tim. So we've got a question here about how do we minimize pinhole leaks and copper pipes. That's more of a not really a question for our infrastructure. We're not dealing with a lot of copper pipe on our end. That's more, I think, inside people's homes, indoor plumbing. I don't know if we really have any tips for that? That's really more of like a plumbing issue.
Seth, the addition of the lime at the stations to buffer the pH, that's what leaves a corrosive protector on the pipe. And that's not only for our metal pipe in our system, but for copper pipes in a customer's home as well. Pinhole leaks on copper started to become more prevalent as cheaper types of copper started to be sold. Inferior copper, in essence, or it could also be, if it's in the fittings, it could also be a problem with the flux that was used.
Yep, absolutely. Someone is asking, Darren's asking, are you saying the use of whole house filtration systems take out necessary chlorine? I was told whole house filtration systems are good. So that's, as we discussed earlier, that's a little bit of a double-edged sword. So chlorine, as Kathy mentioned earlier, we put about 1 part per million of chlorine in the water as it goes out to distribution. Legally, we're allowed to put up to 4 parts per million. We go with 1 just to, for taste reasons and things like that. We try not to overload you. That chlorine is not only mandated by law, but is necessary to ensure the disinfection of our water, making sure nobody's getting water with bacteria in it that can get them sick. So that whole house filtration system, if it's taking out chlorine, again, everyone's, sensitivity to chlorine is different. That could be a boon to you. If you taste chlorine in your water, that filter will take some of that taste out, which is nice. But again, you just want to make sure that you're changing out any home filtration system to make sure we're not inviting bacteria once we've removed the chlorine. So home house filtration systems are not inherently bad. There's nothing wrong with having a home house filtration system. Do you need a home house filtration system in terms of your water quality to make sure your water is safe to drink? Absolutely not. Next question, how long do newer water heaters tend to last before they start to rust out? I'm not sure that's something we can answer, but I don't know if anyone wants to take a shot at it.
It's too wide a scope to answer. It will vary based on the manufacturer, based on the material and the coatings, if they're using a coating inside. And it'll also vary based on the water quality from well to well, even within our system. So it's really just a difficult question to answer.
Got it. Someone was curious if we know the number of sample stations specifically in Selden. I don't think we have that exact number on hand, but that's something we can get you if you want to send us an email.
I would say there's probably like 3 or 4 in the Selden area.
Oh, all right.
That's not a verbatim number, but it's approximate.
Makes sense. Is the odd even irrigation schedule a requirement? I know Nassau County has this as a requirement. If not, do you have any similar requests? So that's a great question. As the person states, it actually is a requirement in Nassau County that you follow odd day, even day watering schedules. We do not have the same requirement here in Suffolk County. We talked about Lycap earlier, Long Island Commission for Aquifer Protection. That's actually one of the things that Lycap is looking into and possibly lobbying for going forward, some sort of mandatory rain sensor law that everyone who has an irrigation system have a rain sensor, or maybe even mandatory odd even. It's something that Lycap is exploring right now, but as of now, no, we don't have any requirements for that in Suffolk. I think we covered hard water earlier. What about pesticides all over the lawn, golf courses, etc.? Do we see pesticides leaching into the aquifer?
So I could take that question, Seth. So yes, occasionally we will see pesticides, man-made chemicals, synthetics, herbicides, and the good part about that is that for the finished product, it's easily removed by granular activated carbon. So it's not something that's in the distribution, but it may be in our source water.
We see it more as a product of farming activity. So it's something we would see more on the North Fork, let's say, where we would put, like Kathy said, we would put carbon filters on it.
Do we know, with some of the areas being so close to the coast, would we ever reach a point where our wells along the shore area would draw up so much water it would lower the water table to where we're hitting salt water? I've heard this can be an issue in South Carolina and Florida. Does anyone want to touch on that? Scott, maybe?
Sure. Yeah, it could always be a problem. It's something that we have to monitor on coastal communities. Our wells are sampled sometimes weekly, bi-weekly for chlorides, and we start at a very small amount. So chloride just an indication of salt, but we're talking just a very small amount of chlorides. We'll decrease the pumping so that we don't draw it in. But yeah, if some communities, if you have a well right by the coast, and it's not necessarily you're going to draw down the water table. You have vertical migration. So if you're over pumping along the coast, typically how water works here in the island is that the mound of fresh water is in the middle of the island, and it goes basically from the divide of, say, the LIE north to the Sound, south to the Atlantic Ocean. So the water that we're not using is always getting discharged to the Basin Ocean all the time. If you do have a well that's right on the coast and you over pump it, you could have vertical migration of the chlorides or sometimes upcombing from the bottom and get chlorides into your well, saltwater intrusion. But it's extensively tested here and monitored. And if we ever have any spikes in chlorides, we'll decrease the pumpage on that well and let it sit and rest. And that's about how we go about it here.
All right, great. Next question we have is, how much fluoride do we put into the water, and has it been increasing? I can answer that. We do not put any fluoride in the water. We never have, and we don't plan on doing it in the future. How much is the smart controller, and how is it attached, or how does it work? So basically, smart controllers, they vary in cost depending on brand, obviously, but they run somewhere between $85 up to about $300. Again, you could find them at basically any hardware store. You could find them on Amazon. And basically how they work is it replaces your existing irrigation timer. If you already have an irrigation system at home, you'll have a timer, whether it's in the garage or outdoors. And this actually just replaces that existing timer. You don't need a whole new irrigation system. What is an Aop reactor? We talked about Aop reactors earlier and how Aop treatment systems remove 1,4-dioxane from drinking water. Tim, do you want to expand on what an Aop system is?
Yeah, sure. Just in very simple terms, an Aop reactor is just a vessel which is a light chamber, and we use ultraviolet light. And what we do is we inject an oxidant. That's the oxidation part of the Aop. The oxidant we use is hydrogen peroxide. So we inject hydrogen peroxide in the presence of UV light. And what that does is it creates hydroxyl radicals. I don't want to get into a chemistry dissertation. That's Kathy's bailiwick, and she'll probably correct me if I'm wrong. But what it does is it essentially destroys the molecules that make up 1,4-dioxane. And then we have a carbon filter on the back side of that, or the downstream side of the reactor, and that quenches the peroxide.
All right, great. So let's see, next question we got here. In order to conserve water, do you recommend collecting rainwater and using it for plants? If so, any requirements on this? Well, no requirements. Obviously, we leave that up to the discretion of you at home, how you want to conserve water. But is that something we recommend? Absolutely, yeah. If you can save rainwater, even, excess water from, pet dishes, things like that, used to water your plants, recycle that water. Yeah, we're all for that. Absolutely. What is the best whole house filter technology to install? Reverse osmosis wastes too much water and fills up the cesspool. What else is good for filtering things like PFOA and other chemicals? So we kind of touched on this earlier when we talked about whole house filters. Again, it's the prerogative of the homeowner. If you'd like a home house filter, that's completely up to you. But you do not need to install one in terms of your water quality. Your water is safe to consume as is. I know at home ever since I started working at the Water Authority, especially, I drink the water right out of my sink. I don't even use a Brita anymore. So that's just me. Are there any AOP systems planned for the Ronkonkoma, Holbrook, or Centereach area? Do we know that offhand? I don't have the map in front of me, but
Most of the 1,4-dioxane that we've seen in our wells is in the Huntington area, with some in the Smithtown area. I don't know off the top of my head about Ronkonkoma, Holbrook, and Centereach. But if there's anything that's half the MCL, the maximum contaminant level, or MCL, as stated before, is 1 part per billion. You know, and so we'll have systems in place for any well that's close to that.
great. Christine would like to know, how long does it take for the water collected in recharge basins to reach the aquifer?
It's hard to give a time frame on that. Certain places, geology is totally different throughout the island. There's different clay lenses throughout. So some places it's very permeable. Say maybe it could take a year or two. Sometimes it could take 50 to 100 years, especially to get down to the depth of that we're pumping most of our water. It might not take that long to get to the upper glacial aquifer, but if we're to travel down through the Magothy aquifer, it takes upwards up to, it can take a few hundred years for it to get down that deep. And that's why we're fortunate to have the situation that we have, or the amount of water and how old and clean the water typically is.
Makes sense. Makes sense. How large a problem is fertilizer to our aquifers? I think we touched on this earlier when we talked about pesticides. So, I mean, fertilizer, it's really something we'll only see, I guess, towards sort of the agriculture communities, maybe on the North Fork, but it's not really too much of a problem. We're not really seeing fertilizer at any sort of significant levels. Is that correct, Kathy?
Well, we see fertilizers and byproducts of fertilizers. Perchlorates is in 75% of our wells, but again, that is all removed by granular activated carbon. So we test for 400 compounds, and a large amount of that is man-made materials. And anything that we find, we remove before the water goes out to the customer.
The other thing to remember with nitrate levels is, when people talk about problems with nitrates, you have to be very specific. We deal with drinking water. We supply drinking water. So what's not a problem for us in terms of drinking water because of the levels that humans can tolerate may be a problem for estuaries and marine life, right? So you may have one group of people who are talking about danger to coastal marshlands and things like that. And that's a much more sensitive environment than what we as humans can tolerate in terms of nitrates. So two different things going on there.
All right. Will we switch to sores instead of cesspools in Lake Ronkonkoma? That's really not a question that we can answer here at the authority. I don't think it's going out on a limb to say that, we don't dislike, installations of sewers, but that's really more of a question for your local government and your government representatives, I would say. We don't really control that here. Has anyone addressed the fluoride controversy, and what are your assurances that it's safe in drinking water? Again, we do not add fluoride to the water. We never have, and we do not plan on adding fluoride in the future. There's kind of, I guess, two schools of thought with fluoride, right? It's among, drinking water suppliers, it's, the obvious dental benefits weighed against. There's been some studies about potentially negative health effects from fluoride. We've always been in kind of the no fluoride camp, but it's not really, that's just been our policy that we don't fluorinate.
And also to your point, Seth, fluoride is also naturally occurring. So I just want to point out to everyone watching that in these areas, it's not been detected. We probably tested for it about 450 times last year in zones 12 and 15, which covers these towns, and there was no detections of fluoride naturally occurring.
All right. So that's all the questions I have in the Q&A. I'm going to take a quick scroll of the chat right now, because I know some people had some questions in the chat. I just want to knock those out and make sure we get to everybody. I think we answered some of these questions already. Yep. So far, so good. How long will water remain in the aquifer on Long Island? The answer to that is hopefully as long as we have people on Long Island. But I don't know if Scott wants to expand on that.
Yeah, it would take hundreds of years with zero precipitation to actually lose all the water in the aquifer, or at least make it so it's not viable fresh water. So some major climatic event would have to happen. So just be rest assured, we're not running out of water. But like we've talked before, we need to have conservation efforts. We want to protect it to make sure the water quality is good. We don't want to overpump coastal communities, and we want to ensure that it stays healthy for us all.
All right, great. Oscar was having some water pressure issues at home. He was told he had to shut off his water at the source from the street. Does he need to call us so we can turn it off, or can he do that himself? Yes, Oscar, you're going to want to call us at our customer service line, and we can send someone over. We could shut that water off for you. Absolutely. Yep, Kathy talked a little bit about the naturally occurring fluoride, so we've covered that. Vincent replaced his sprinkler timer with an Orbit Beehive timer from Home Depot. He says that it actually works better than any rain sensor he's had. Vincent actually brings up a great point here, and it's why smart sprinkler controllers are one of the things that we're trying to push here at the Water Authority that our customers take advantage of. You're connecting to your home's Wi-Fi. It's tracking local weather patterns. You're going to get the best bang for your buck in terms of actual water savings. And to Vincent's point, those rain sensors, they do break fairly easily. We hear a lot of stories about rain sensors, not working after a year or 2 years. So we definitely recommend those smart irrigation controllers. Thank you. And with that, I think we're out of questions for today. I'm going to take one more look. I see, is there a difference of charging between residential and commercial water? Short answer to that is no. We don't have a different price for commercial customers versus residential customers, right, Rich?
That is correct. It is typical that, some of the bigger users are commercial, but we do have a lot of residentials that do use a lot more than commercial as well.
Yep. And then the last question, a lot of different cancers on Long Island. Is water a consideration? I'll let somebody else expand on that, but short answer is no. I know this is something that the New York State Department of Health has looked at pretty extensively, and they've come to the conclusion that the water quality and air quality are really not factors here. So yeah. Short answer is no.
That's true, Seth. There's no scientific evidence to support that that anything to do with our water or pollutants in the water has to do with cancer.
All right. So with that, I just want to thank everybody for coming and hearing us out tonight and for giving us your questions. We really appreciate it. And I want to thank all of our panelists from the Water Authority as well. Rich Ryan Frank, Scott Strom, Tim Kilcommons, and Kathy Nicoletti. Thank you all so much tonight for your work.
Thank you, Seth.
Thanks everybody for attending.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
And thank you to County Legislator Nick Caracappa as well. We really appreciate him joining us.